The maid's hand trembles on the doorknob. It's locked from the inside, or was, until this morning, when she found the key tucked beneath a lipstick-stained envelope on the bedroom vanity. Behind her, sunlight cuts through the Brentwood windows in brutal white slashes, but ahead, through this door, there is only darkness. She knows Miss Monroe's rules. Some rooms are off limits. Some questions don't get asked. But Miss Monroe isn't here anymore to enforce those rules. And the police have already swept through once, cataloguing pills, phone records, half-empty champagne glasses. They never found this door. It hides behind a decorative Chinese screen, in the hallway between the bedroom and the guest bath. A door that doesn't appear on any blueprint, painted the same cream as the walls, nearly invisible unless you know where to look. The maid pushes it open. Inside, a small room no larger than a closet. No windows. A single bulb hangs from the ceiling, unlit. On the floor, a stack of leather journals, their spines cracked and warped. On the wall, photographs pinned in clusters, some faces she recognizes, some she doesn't. In the corner, a telephone with no cord, and on a small wooden table, a locked metal box. Ornate, heavy, the kind that holds something worth protecting, or worth hiding. The maid steps back into the hallway and closes the door softly, as if afraid to wake something. She doesn't call the police. She doesn't tell anyone. Some secrets, she understands, were meant to stay buried, but to understand how this moment came to be, we must go back to the beginning. Hollywood in its golden age is a factory that manufactures dreams and destroys the dreamers. Marilyn Monroe understands this better than anyone. She has learned to smile with her whole body, to let her voice curl like smoke, to move as if the camera is her only true lover. She has learned that the world wants her soft, wants her yielding, wants her to be an idea rather than a person, and she has learned that the price of being adored is the erasure of everything you actually are. The Brentwood house is supposed to be her sanctuary, Spanish style, tucked behind gates and greenery, far from the studio lots, the gossip columnists, and the men who think they own pieces of her. She buys it with her own money. No husband, no benefactor, no strings. For the first time in her life, she has a place that belongs only to her. She fills it with books, with art, with white furniture and soft textures. She wants it to feel clean, wants it to feel like starting over. But the house has ghosts. Late at night, when the sleeping pills haven't yet pulled her under, she walks the empty hallways in a silk robe, cigarette in hand, and feels the weight of all the versions of herself she's performed. The sex pot, the comedienne, the tragic beauty, the difficult actress, the unstable woman. She has worn so many masks that sometimes, standing in front of her bedroom mirror, she can't remember which face is really hers. According to those close to her, this is when the idea begins, the need for a space that exists outside the performance, a room where she can keep the parts of herself that don't belong to the cameras, to the studio executives, to the public that devours her image like candy, a room where Norma Jean, the girl before Marilyn, can still exist. The construction happens quietly. She hires a contractor who asks no questions, pays him in cash, tells him she wants a hidden storage space for valuables. The door is installed behind the Chinese screen. The lock is custom made. Only she has the key. What does she keep in there? At first perhaps, it's simple. Letters from her mother, still institutionalized, whose handwriting slants and loops in ways that frighten and sadden her. Old photographs from the orphanage, from her foster home, from the years before she became property of the dream machine. A diary where she writes in the middle of the night. Not the carefully crafted passages she'd allow a biographer to see, but raw, jagged thoughts about loneliness, rage, and the feeling of being consumed alive by fame. But as the months pass, as the pressures mount and the world closes in, the room becomes something else, something more dangerous. Studio insiders whispered that Marilyn was unraveling, showing up late to sets if she showed up at all, forgetting her line, locked in her dressing room for hours, refusing to come out. The official narrative blamed pills, blamed instability, blamed the same fragility they'd sold to the public as part of her charm. But some who knew her suggested something different was happening. She was pulling away, creating distance, building walls where there had only been vulnerability, and the hidden room grows with her secrets. She begins meeting someone there, or so the rumors go. Late night visitors who slip through the back garden gate, who park their cars 3 blocks away, who wear hats pulled low and collars turned up. The maid who sleeps in the guest cottage sometimes hears voices through the walls at 3 in the morning. 2 voices, Marilyn's low and urgent, and another, deeper, masculine, familiar in a way that makes the maid's stomach twist with recognition and dread. This was never confirmed, but those closest to the situation believed she was documenting everything, writing down conversations, recording phone calls, keeping evidence of things that powerful men wanted to remain buried. Some say she'd grown paranoid, convinced the studios were planning to destroy her reputation completely, to paint her as too damaged to work, to erase her from the industry she'd clawed her way into. Others insist she'd simply decided to take control of her own story, to hold insurance against the people who'd used her. The metal box on the table in the hidden room. What's inside? Letters. According to the whispers, letters that would rewrite history, letters that named names, detailed affairs, exposed the machinery of power and manipulation that kept Hollywood's brightest stars in line, letters that would destroy marriages, topple careers, shatter the careful mythology the studios had built around American royalty, and photograph, not the kind she posed for in satin and diamonds, but the candid kind, the dangerous kind, proof of presence, proof of intimacy, proof of connections that were supposed to stay secret. One particularly persistent rumor suggests she kept recordings, a tape recorder hidden in her bedroom, activated during certain visits. The technology existed, and Marilyn was far smarter than the studios wanted anyone to believe. She'd been underestimated in her entire life. Perhaps she'd learned to use that underestimation as a weapon. The pressure intensified. Phone calls in the middle of the night, not from lovers, but from men with hard voices, who tell her to be careful, to remember who gave her everything, to think about what she has to lose. She stops sleeping. The pills multiply. Her hands shake when she lights her cigarette, but she keeps going to the hidden room. She adds to it, a timeline perhaps pinned to the wall with photographs and newspaper clippings, connected by red thread, like something from a detective's obsession, names circled, dates noted, a pattern emerging that only she can see, or perhaps that only she is willing to see. Her therapist, she sees one regularly now, driving to appointments with dark glasses, and a scarf covering her platinum hair, notices the change. Marilyn talks about feeling watched, about sensing danger, about wanting to tell the truth before someone else tells their version of it. The therapist takes notes, prescribes more medication, and wonders privately whether his patient is experiencing delusions, or if she's the only one seeing clearly. Then comes the twist that changes everything. A visitor arrives one evening in late spring. The maid sees a black car idling at the gate. She watches from the cottage window, as Marilyn, wrapped in a camel coat, despite the warmth, walks down the driveway, and speaks through the bars to someone inside the vehicle. The conversation lasts 7 minutes. The maid times it. When Marilyn returns, her face is white, her movements mechanical. She goes directly to the hidden room, and stays there for 3 hours. The next morning, the maid finds Marilyn in the kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at nothing. There's a burn on her forearm, fresh and blistering, as if she'd held it too close to something hot. When asked about it, Marilyn only smiles, that famous smile, empty now, a reflex without feel. She says, "I was destroying evidence, or maybe creating it. I can't remember which anymore. What was burned? What was saved?" The maid doesn't ask, but she notices the hidden room's lock has been changed. A new key, heavier, more complex, and Marilyn wears it now on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her blouses, resting against her heart like a talisman. The phone rings constantly. Marilyn stops answering. She unplugs it from the wall, then plugs it back in, then unplugs it again, as if she can't decide whether silence or noise is more terrifying. She receives a visitor. A woman this time, elegant, cold. She stays for 20 minutes, and leaves behind an envelope. The maid finds it later, torn open, empty. Whatever was inside, Marilyn has taken to the hidden room. Hollywood insiders begin to whisper that she was writing a memoir, not the sanitized studio-approved version, but the real story. Publishers are interested. Her lawyer advises against it. Friends urge her to reconsider. But Marilyn, according to those who saw her during this period, seems almost serene in her decision. She says she's tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people control the narrative, tired of the mask. The journals multiply. She fills them with furious handwriting, sometimes legible, sometimes dissolving into scratches and loops that look like screaming on the page. She writes about her marriages, her affairs, her abortions, her ambitions. She writes about the men who promised to leave their wives and never did, about the executives who traded roles for sexual favors, about the photographers who sold private photographs to tabloids, about the studio heads who built her up specifically so they could tear her down. She writes about loneliness that feels like drowning, about the peculiar torture of being the most desired woman in the world and feeling completely unloved, about lying in bed after parties, still wearing her diamonds, crying until she can't breathe. And she writes about power, not the power others have over her, but the power she's beginning to understand she holds, the power of knowledge, the power of documentation, the power of being willing to burn everything down if pushed too far. Some say she received one final visitor in the last weeks, a man who came through the back garden at midnight, who stayed until, who left behind nothing but cigarette butts ground into the patio stones, and a profound change in Marilyn's demeanor. After that visit, according to the maid, Marilyn seems both lighter and more frightened. She hums while making coffee. She also starts checking the locks obsessively, testing the windows, looking over her shoulder when walking from the car to the house. She tells her therapist during their last session that she is finally going to be free. She doesn't explain what that means. He assumes she's talking about some emotional breakthrough, some release from the psychological patterns that haunt her, but perhaps she means something more literal. Perhaps she means she is going to speak, regardless of consequences. Perhaps the hidden room has become an arsenal, and she is preparing for war. The day comes, that day everyone knows about, the one the world remembers in official reports, in investigative documentaries, in conspiracy theories that never quite die. The maid finds her. The police arrive. The studio sends representatives. Journalists gather outside the gates like vultures, circling something already dead. But here's what nobody mentions: the hidden room. The police search the house thoroughly, cataloging everything: the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen, the living space. They note the pills on the nightstand, the phone knocked off the hook, the position of the body, the state of the bedsheets. They photograph everything. They take statements, they make their determinations. But the door behind the Chinese screen, painted the same cream as the wall, nearly invisible unless you know to look, goes unnoticed. Or perhaps it's noticed and deliberately ignored. Perhaps someone makes a phone call. Perhaps someone in authority decides that some doors are better left closed. The maid knows. She finds the key tucked beneath that lipstick-stained envelope the next morning, after the police have left, and the house has gone quiet with the terrible silence of recent death. She unlocks the door and sees what Marilyn wanted hidden: the journals, the photograph, the timeline of red thread and circled names, the metal box she never opens. She could call someone. She could reveal what she's found, the truth Marilyn was trying to protect, or expose, depending on how you look at it, could finally emerge into the light. Instead, she closes the door, locks it, takes the key with her when she leaves the house for the last time. Why? This detail was said to be buried by the studios, but some versions of the story suggest the maid received a visitor of her own, a man in an expensive suit, who offered her a sum of money that would change her life. All she had to do was forget the hidden room, forget what she'd seen, forget that Marilyn Monroe had been anything other than the tragic, fragile creature the public narrative required her to be. Or perhaps the maid simply understood that some secrets are too heavy for the world to bear, that sometimes protecting someone's privacy, even after death, is the last kindness you can offer. The house is sold. The new owners never discover or if they do, they never speak of it. The hidden door becomes invisible again, folded back into the architecture, waiting. Decades pass. The legend of Marilyn Monroe calcifies into myth. She becomes an icon, a symbol, a Halloween costume, a coffee mug, a poster in college dorms. The studios win. The mask becomes the only face anyone remembers. But somewhere in Brentwood, behind a Chinese screen in a house that's changed hands a dozen times, there may still be a door, and behind that door,
A small room where the real Marilyn, frightened, furious, brilliant, desperate, left pieces of truth that nobody wanted her to possess. What was in the metal box? What names did the photographs capture? What did the journals really say about power and fear and a machinery that devoured her? We'll never know, or perhaps we already know, on some instinctive level, and that's why the story haunts us, because Marilyn Monroe wasn't just destroyed by fame, she was destroyed by the choice between speaking her truth and surviving, and in the end she chose truth, locked it in a hidden room, and hoped someone, someday would be brave enough to open the door, but they never did. The maid took the key when she left. She died 20 years later, without ever telling anyone what she'd seen. Her daughter found a strange heavy key among her mother's possessions, old-fashioned, attached to no lock anyone could identify. She threw it away, not knowing she was discarding the last link to Hollywood's most dangerous secret. Or maybe the key still exists somewhere, in a pawn shop, in a collector's drawer, in the back of a jewelry box, mistaken for costume jewelry, and maybe someone, someday, will find the hidden door again, will turn the lock, will step into that small windowless room, and discover what Marilyn Monroe was willing to die protecting. Or maybe the room was emptied long ago. Maybe men in suits came in the night after the funeral, removed every scrap of evidence, every dangerous word, every photograph that could destroy carefully constructed legacies. Maybe they painted over the walls, tore out the shell, sealed up the past as efficiently as they'd always sealed up scandal. The truth exists in that uncertainty. The power of the hidden room isn't what it contained, it's that it existed at all. That Marilyn Monroe, the woman the world thought it owned completely, had carved out one space that belonged only to her, one room where she could take off the mask, one locked door, between her true self and the machine that was grinding her to dust. She was smarter than they wanted her to be, stronger than they needed her to be, more dangerous than they could allow her to be, so they killed her, or she killed herself, or the pills were an accident, or the truth is something else entirely, something we can't see because we're still looking at the mask, instead of the face beneath it. The hidden room remains, not just as a physical space in a Brentwood house, but as a metaphor for everything Hollywood erases, all the complexity, the intelligence that doesn't fit the narrative, all the women who were told to smile and suffer silently, who tried to fight back, and were painted as difficult, unstable, destroyed. Marilyn Monroe locked her truth behind that door, and Hollywood locked the door behind her. The question that remains, the question that keeps us searching, theorizing, obsessing over this story, is simple. What happened when she finally decided the truth was worth more than survival? And did anyone, even for a moment, have the courage to believe?